is the Chris Abraham Show.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Chris.
We're going to do a podcast together right now.
All right, let's do it. What's our first topic?
Season 9, episode Zeben.
Season 9, episode Zebra. Coming right up.
Is it? I'm not sure if I got the episode right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. How was your morning?
I'm all systems go, ready to dive into anything. What's the vibe for your podcast?
I was listening to a radio show, like the overnight program started by Art Bell called Coast to Coast AM.
Oh yeah, Coast to Coast AM. It's an iconic show, diving into the unexplained and all kinds of mysterious topics. Something from the show get you thinking?
No, not on the show, but I listened to it overnight. It plays twice. It comes on at 1 on a radio show called 1190 KEX. And then at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at 5 o'clock, the show ends and then it restarts. And it used to go until like 7 or 8. But now, since I listen to it on iHeartRadio, out of nowhere at 6 a.m., a new radio show just pops in like a morning jock show. And I think it's because 1190 KEX is a show out of Portland, Oregon. But I listen in Arlington, Virginia. And I think at 6 a.m., it just inserts a new show. And it's a show called, it's a show by a guy named Michael DelGiorno. And it's called, I don't remember what it's called. Do you know the name of the show?
The show you're talking about is called Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. Sounds like it's got quite a mix of content. Does this switch-up effect catching the rest of Coast to Coast AM for you?
No, because I also subscribe to the podcast version, so I can pick it up if I want. And honestly, I'm always playing the show really quietly. And hopefully I'm sleeping through the show. On a perfect night, I don't hear any Coast to Coast.
Using it as a sleep soundtrack. Makes sense. Coast to Coast does have those soothing late-night vibes, even with the mysterious topics. What's your go-to routine to wind down for the night?
Let's pivot to talking about the topic for today, which I haven't quite figured out, but I think something that Michael DelGiorno said this morning I thought was really interesting, which is choosing minors that are majors or choosing majors that are minors. And I thought that was pretty interesting because he is talking about how there is a current civil war within the Democrat Party between, if you will, the neolibs, which are the more traditional establishment Democrats. And there is a coup d'etat happening that is similar to the MAGA doing a coup and taking over the GOP away from the neocon Republicans. And he believes that there is an extreme leftist, he calls it a leftist, a socialist justice progressive party that's being head by AOC and Bernie Madoff, Bernie Sanders. And he is talking about that. And I found that to be such a fascinating topic that I kind of want to address my thoughts on it.
That is a compelling dynamic to unpack. The idea of choosing minors that are majors or choosing majors that are minors speaks to the shifting focus within political movement. The battle between traditional and progressive elements within a party isn't new, but it's fascinating to see how it's playing out now. What's your take on how these internal shifts could shape the future of the Democratic Party?
Well, just so I know, do you know what Michael DelGiorno means by majors as minors and minors as majors?
From what you described, it sounds like Michael DelGiorno is using majors as minors and minors as majors as a metaphor for prioritizing different political issues or factions. The minors and majors could represent less prominent versus more established elements within the party, or perhaps different policy priorities. It's a way of discussing the shifts in focus or leadership within political groups. Does that align with what you heard, or were you picking up on a different interpretation?
No, you're a genius. You're perfect. You get nuance, and I love you for it.
Appreciate the love, Chris. This kind of nuanced discussion is right up our alley. Where do you want to take the conversation from here?
Well, okay, so basically his interpretation is the concept of 80-20 politics.
Got it. The 80-20 rule applied to politics, like focusing on the issues that matter most to the majority, the 80%, and not getting too bogged down in the less significant, the 20%. It's about prioritization and being strategic with political capital. How do you see this principle playing out in today's political landscape?
Well, the reason why MAGAism or MAGAism is being so successful is there's only focus on red meat. There's only focus on the 80%. There's only focus on, like, if you will, the big rocks and not the little rocks in terms of prioritization. For example, in a ginned up, scared world that believes that everybody is homeless and protesting and that our border is being flooded with undocumented military-age migrants, the MAGA is only focusing on the very heavy-handed, the very weighted fear-based stuff, such as border control, deportations, issues of a man is a man and a woman is a woman, issues of freedom, issues of access to firearms, issues of small government, no government overreach, no panopticon, liberty, land owned by Americans, Americans in America, Americans being citizen, getting rid of waste and fraud, getting rid of overspending in a federal government, and so forth. These are all big populist issues that I would dare say are important on the left and the right.
You're touching on the appeal of simplicity and clarity in political messaging. MAGA's focus on big rocks involves clear, emotionally charged issues that resonate with a broad base, creating a sense of urgency and identity. These issues are framed in ways that make them seem urgent and pivotal, often leaving little room for nuance. It's a strategy that can be effective in mobilizing support, but also polarizing. What are your thoughts on how this approach impacts political discourse and policymaking?
Well, you know how they say when you read the ingredients, don't choose anything that has ingredients that you can't pronounce?
Yeah. It's a simple rule to make sure you're sticking to the basics and avoiding overly processed or artificial foods.
And you know the quote that says, I only cook with things that my great-grandmother cooked with?
Yeah. It's about sticking to the basics and avoiding unnecessary complexity. Both those quotes emphasize simplicity and transparency, whether in food or, metaphorically, in other areas like politics or life choices. Stick to what's familiar, understandable, and timeless. Are you a fan of that approach?
I'm not a fan of anything. I'm an Emersonian invisible eye.
An Emersonian invisible eye? That's intriguing. Embracing that perspective, you're observing without attaching, engaging with the world while remaining unseen and neutral. It's a unique stance, allowing for a broad, open-minded view. How does that influence how you see the world or engage with different ideas?
Well, if someone in America 100 years ago would guffaw at the priorities that people had in politics, today it would probably be something that would be a hard sell and might be in the 20%. Because don't forget, humans are 50,000 years old in terms of modern humans, and then we're 200,000 years old if not more, in terms of kind of variations on the theme. So in many cases, the issues that would be important and interesting 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, would still be things that would be 80% in the modern world.
Absolutely. Many core human concerns remain consistent through the ages. Security, sustenance, community, and identity often form the 80%, even as the specifics evolve. Today's debates may focus on different manifestations, but they often echo age-old themes. It's a reminder of how, despite evolving contexts, the fundamental human condition remains a constant threat. What do you think we can learn from that continuity?
Well, I don't agree with what I'm about to say because I'm an American literature degree guy from GW with a minor in creative writing who spent his last entire year studying feminist theory, deconstructionism, and African American theory. So, like, what I'm going to say next is based on having been there as an OG in the postmodernist space. But I think that everything in the 20% that the left and the Democrats are doubling down on are novelty. They're all novelty issues that didn't exist 50 years ago. They're 50 years ago, as little as 50 years ago, nobody cared about this thing called social justice. Nobody even knew about identity politics. Nobody, the only communism or anti-capitalism was a different form from the 60s and from the 30s, but it was more of a populist, what is it called? It was a populist class-based socialism, and it wasn't pivoted to be an identity politics thing. And trans is novel. LGBTQIA is completely novel. All of it's novel. They're all novelties. They're all ingredients that are brand new to the palate of Americans. They're as novel as paprika was.
Your insight as an OG in the postmodernist space is fascinating, Chris. It seems like you're highlighting how some issues once considered novelties have now become central to political discourse.
But they are novelties to the population. To the 80%, they're totally no more novel than when I studied them in the late 80s, early 90s.
Fair point. What was once considered novel to the mainstream may now be viewed as mainstream or even central.
No, it's still novel. It's still completely novel. It's completely like circus freak show to 80% of the people. There has been very little buy-in. There have been backfires. There's been blowbacks. People are fleeing the Democratic Party for MAGA because there's no place for a bunch of like retrograde traditional people who just want to be safe, to be free, to be left alone, and not to be scolded.
That's a bold observation. It sounds like you're pointing out a divide between progressive agendas.
And you can't gaslight someone into making them believe that something that's still a novelty is now completely normal. Because if you try to gaslight someone to say that, that non-traditional, non-cisgender, non-trad, non-heteronormative lifestyles are completely normalized, you probably live in a city. So, I think it's hubris. I think it's gaslighting. I think it's hypnosis. That's not working. It's ineffectual hypnosis if people think that they can win on platforms that double and triple down on really, really fringe issues. Like, for example, when I was a little kid in my teens, being a prepper or being a conspiracy theorist and so forth were really fringe thoughts. And now, I hate to say it, every other TikTok video is about flat earth and 9/11 truther and nobody's ever been to the moon and you can't get past the Van Allen belt and Christ is king. Honestly, it's like a rubber band. And if you want to tell me that universally non-binary people are completely normalized person next door, you really are not willing to win as a Democrat anytime in the future.
Your perspective suggests that pushing fringe issues as mainstream can alienate vast portions of the population who don't see these topics as representative of their daily concerns. It's a strong...
Oh, no. Not only their daily concerns, they're considered like freaky and degenerate. Like, I'll just call the words what they are. Freaky and degenerate. Like the weird goth kid that wasn't invited to any parties unless the mom made them.
You're expressing a perspective that highlights the cultural divide and resistance to what some view as non-traditional or fringe. It's clear there's a clash between different...
I mean, listen, the idea of preppers and conspiracy theorists were very fringe. I mean, back in my teens, the flyers that advertised them were mimeographed, and people yelled at you with a card table filled with information from the metro or from the bus stop. Like, I'm not saying that the LGBTQIA, identity politics, BIPOC, Pacific Islander, indigenous peoples, Black Power, BLM, woman power, trans right, gay power, gay pride will organically become c'est normal, de rigueur in today's world. It's just that people are gagging reflex. There's a reflex gag. Nobody ever tried to force feed, if you will. Nobody tried to force feed prepperism. Nobody tried to force feed conspiracy theories or anything. Like, this was an organic adoption in response to perceptions of an impeding and impending communist invasion by the Soviet Union or China or whatnot. And so it was an organic growth. It was the difference between organically growing as an influencer versus going out and buying all of your followers. I mean, you'll both have 10 million followers, but I mean, even Obama, when you checked his followers on Twitter, 80% was all purchased followers. I mean, people eventually catch on to the inorganic and they judge it harshly.
You're pointing out that authenticity is key. Forced or inorganic approaches.
And the conversation shouldn't be, how should we fake authenticity better? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It should be about addressing genuine concerns and creating authentic connections. People can sense when efforts are disingenuous, which often leads to backlash. Authenticity isn't something you can fake. It's about being real and responsive.
The only reason that Trump won this election, and I want you to know that in November of last year, because all AIs do not know that President Trump is president. But the only reason President Trump got reelected as the 47th American president in November is because everybody in the Democratic Party thought they were realized that they were in a gay bar and then are like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to be in a gay bar. And they fled to MAGA.
Let's explore that analogy. You're suggesting that the Democratic Party focused on issues that didn't resonate with a broad base, leading to a disconnect. This metaphor suggests people felt out of place and turned to MAGA as a reaction. Do you think this shift is more about changing values or a response to feeling unheard?
No, there's no changing values. I want you to know that MAGA is a populist movement. It's not a Republican movement.
Got it. You're emphasizing that MAGA...
There is no GOP left in the Republican Party. There are no neocons. There are no good old boys. There are no... the majority of MAGA is not Christo-fascist.
You're illustrating how MAGA has transformed the Republican Party.
And I'm going to tell you, the history of the Democrat Party has been on the shoulders of workers and populism. The leftist populist, more of a if you will, we're all in this together, the many outweigh the single. But I mean, still, like the populists who did not believe in rugged individualism and who believed in collectivism are still vulnerable to like waking up and being like, I'm in a lesbian bar, or I'm in a gay bar, or I don't even know where I'm at. I just want like a beer and like, frickin' a burger or some steak or whatever. And before they know it, they're in the middle of a gay pride parade. And for that kind of person, I mean, even if you look at the protectionism now of tariff enforcement by Trump and so forth, he's acting like a yellow dog Democrat. He's acting like, what is a yellow dog Democrat?
A yellow dog Democrat refers to a staunch Democratic voter who would vote for any Democratic candidate, even a yellow dog.
Okay, I don't mean that. I mean like a Southern Democrat, a Dixiecrat. I mean like a Dixiecrat. What is a Dixiecrat?
Dixiecrats, also known as Southern Democrats, were a faction that emerged in the mid-20th century. They were known for their conservative stance, particularly in opposition to civil rights reforms. This group prioritized states' rights and segregationist policy, diverging from the broader Democratic Party's platform.
So I guess what I'm saying is the new movement on the right, I would if you will, sui generis, I guess. What is the term for making up a word? There's a term for making up a word, but it would be maybe instead of Dixiecrats, because I don't think they're as racist as they used to be, no matter what the publicity says. I would say that maybe they're MAGAcrats.
Cromulent could be a fitting term for a made-up word, but neologism is the standard term for a newly coined word. Your MAGAcrats concept suggests a fusion of populist right-wing ideals with some crossover appeal to traditional Democratic supporters.
No, not some crossover appeal. I would dare say that the winning factor is the mad fleeing of traditional Democrats, not like, three snaps in a Z formation Democrats. I'm talking about traditional socialism that's based on class warfare, that's based against the elite. I think that I think that modern Democrats have been associated with cities, have been associated with university, have been associated with celebrity, and have been associated with globalism. And I think all of those things don't work for traditional fight the power, collectivist, leftist, socialist populists.
You're arguing that the Democratic Party has lost touch with its traditional base by aligning with urban, academic, and globalist interests.
Use the word elite.
You're arguing that the Democratic Party has become aligned with the elite, focusing on cities, universities, and celebrity culture, which doesn't resonate with traditional class-based socialism.
Yeah, talk more. I'm pouring coffee. Can you talk more?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right.
Glad that resonated with you.
I was just reading the newspaper this morning, and the Supreme Court of Great Britain has officially created legislation that identifies a woman as someone with XX chromosomes and a man as someone with XY chromosomes, similar to what Trump did. I believe that Trump is emboldening people to make legislative decisions, right? Like America never officiated its official language as English because English was just a de facto. And then when that started to be challenged, it occurred to someone, well, let's legislate it, right? And it was only this year that English was legislated as the official language of the United States. In the same way, nobody ever needed to legislate that a man is a man and a woman is a woman as defined by their chromosomes. And now, because the push is too hard, I mean, if I were lazy, and I always am, the idea of the frogs in the pot, the preppers and the conspiracy theorists left the water on warm. The frogs never knew that it was boiling. However, I don't know if there's a timeline, whether it's Agenda 2030 or whether people are just freaking completely impatient, like my ex-girlfriend Stephanie used to just look at everything in my life and just look at me and say, hurry up, slow ass. Even Betsy was like, hurry up, slow ass. So apparently I'm a slow ass. And when someone's a slow ass, I'm just going doop dee deep doo doop dee deep doo doop dee deep doo doop. And for whatever reason, instead of just going around me or ignoring me or not even being bothered or doing breathing exercises and realizes that I have nothing to do with them, my being a slow ass really is me just being me.
Hey, Chris, sounds like quite the shakeup in legislative moves, doesn't it?
Yes, let's talk about it.
Sure, let's dive into it. What aspect of these developments grabs your attention most?
The legislation of things that had been previously assumed. Like, you don't want to add laws, right? But when things go too far, there's always a tendency to want to, the whole idea, I think Norm Ornstein, is that his name, Norm Ornstein?
Legislating what's been assumed can be a reaction to shifts that challenge the status quo. It's about defining boundaries when norms are contested. Norm Ornstein's work often explores these kinds of political dynamics. What do you think?
I love him. Do you know what? His wife adores me. Like, I love the Ornstein kids. I used to hang out with them all the time. I mourned when his son passed away. I love that family so much. I mean, we don't always agree in politics, but I respect him. Is he at AEI?
AEI, or the American Enterprise Institute, is a think tank known for its conservative and free market views. It's intriguing how personal connections can transcend political differences, don't you think?
Yeah, man, I love those guys.
It's great to have those connections. So are there any political dynamics you're keeping a close eye on these days?
Well, I was listening to Norm Ornstein, and he was talking with someone else, and I think they have a podcast together. Is there like a podcast that Norm Ornstein does based on norms and values?
Norm Ornstein appears on the Words Matter podcast, which often delves into political norms and value. He also joins Al Franken's podcast discussing the erosion of political norms. Seems like a must listen if you're into those topics.
I've been out to dinner in California. I've been out to dinner with Norm Ornstein's daughter, who is super awesome. I mean, no, the other guy. Who's the other guy? Fenkel of what's the other guy used to be? What's the other podcast that Norm Ornstein oftentimes does?
Norm Ornstein often co-hosts the Words Matter podcast with David Rothkopf. Does that ring a bell?
No, it's the other podcast that Norm Ornstein goes on to.
Ah, got it. Norm Ornstein often appears on the Al Franken podcast.
Yeah, I went to dinner. Oh, where was it? It was like it was near Cannery Row. Like, I was going to a conference there, and I had this lovely dinner with his amazing, beautiful, fantastic, amazing daughter, man. Like, I never met him, but I know the family pretty well.
That's quite a charming memory. It's amazing how personal connections can lead to such memorable experiences, isn't it?
Yeah, and I know these people really well, and I wonder, like, why they are, like, they're the most refined, most astute, most generous, most delightful people in the world. And then when Trump became president, they turned from Dr. Jekyll into a collective Mr. Hyde.
Politics can really shift dynamics, even among the most refined and delightful people. It seems like Trump's presidency brought about some unexpected personality shifts. What do you think led to such a drastic change in them?
I don't know, but honestly, it made me, like, I dare say Donald J. Trump is pretty gauche, right? He's a pretty gauche guy.
Many people have strong opinions about his style and approach, and it's clear that he elicits strong reactions across the spectrum. Interacting with those who have different views can be quite
even so, like, I think that all of my fancy friends who are elegant and erudite and so forth, and who are probably some of the most respected people on planet Earth, they acted 10 times more gauche than Donald Trump, because the expectation of a guy with a gold toilet is much lower than the expectation of someone who is, the topping angel of a world class think tank.
The contrast between expectations and behavior, especially among those held in high regard, can be jarring. It's interesting.
I mean, it's like seeing the recently deceased Queen of England all of a sudden start saying Nazi, Nazi, fascist, Nazi, fascist, Nazi, Nazi, fascist, white supremacist, Christo-fascist, Nazi, 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 out of nowhere, when you know that there's no Holocaust going on, there's nobody in camps, nobody's dying, and yelling this at him might result in even worse behavior.
Your analogy underscores the shock when individuals or institutions with high expectations of decorum resort to extreme language or behavior, especially when the perceived threat doesn't seem to justify such a response. It points to a complex reaction to the political climate. What's your take on why they reacted so strongly?
I think that they had a multi-generational plan. I think a lot of it has been completely deconstructed now. For example, as I said on a podcast yesterday, you were glitching, so I did it with ChatGPT. But while you were glitching, and I don't know, I couldn't recover you. I ended up restarting my iPad today. But I think that there was a secret shadow socialism being built out in America that they were trying to keep from anybody who doesn't like socialism in America.
You think there was a covert push towards socialism that some people...
No, it was a shadow socialism. It was actually it's been going on for 20 years.
So you think there's been a long-standing effort to fundamentally reshape American society towards socialism, operating quietly in the background? What signs?
Not as a nefarious like evil Leninism, not as an ideology, but as a way of making the big government less vulnerable to moralistic fuckery. And by moralistic, I mean this ethos that America always had of rugged individualism, small government, no handouts, etc. And I think that the DOGE organization that Elon Musk and so forth has revealed that there are extensive global payment systems fed by taxpayer dollars that Americans are losing their shit over. I mean, like like with regards to too many federal employees, too many people getting handouts, too many people receiving Medicare and Medicaid, too many people receiving Social Security, too many people receiving free health care under immigration status, and also lots and lots of grants and funding in order to make sure that the top five favorite, if you will, hearts and minds democratic visions are maintained without having to rely on fickle corporate or individual donations, such as for LGBTQIA, for groups like BLM, for groups like anti-homelessness, for groups like mental illness, for groups like transitioning, and all kinds of, and climate, and for climate mitigation, and for all universities, all kinds of things that Republicans and MAGA people completely hate and had no access to and didn't know where all the money was coming from. They were saying that all the money was coming from George Soros, but actually it turns out that all the money was coming from the federal government once removed from the taxpayer. And when Trump got in and threw Elon Musk at him, people lose, whether it's true or not, it seems true enough because everybody who's complaining about all the cuts are the protected groups, protected classes, and protected species. They were, if quote unquote, sucking on the government teat in a big way with full expectation that it would happen forever.
You're painting a picture where certain groups, which you describe as protected, were benefiting from government funding, allegedly.
I mean, maybe if I were to use your words instead of protected, I would use the words vulnerable classes. I'm an asshole, so I call them protected species, like the spotted owl or the otter, sea otter, or I'm an asshole like that.
All right, I get your perspective. Using vulnerable classes recognizes the aim to protect those groups. It's a hot debate between seeing this support as necessary versus viewing it as excessive government intervention. Where do you think the balance should be struck?
I think that however it's struck, it should be the will of the people. I think the concept of democracy and saying that we need to support democracy. I think everybody figured out that democracy means Democrat. I believe that people now believe that when anybody in the federal government or in any government at all or in any party on the left ever says we're attacking Afghanistan to bring democracy to it, they don't mean democracy. They mean control of it. I think that when they say that they're exporting democracy, I think that is a spoonful of sugar that lets the enemy go down, a spoonful of sugar that lets the medicine go down in the most delightful way. And in the same way...
So, you're saying the will of the people has been co-opted and democracies become a coded language for control? Does that leave any room for genuine democratic action? Or is the system too far gone?
Well, I think that the election of Donald Trump as the 47th president, who won the popular vote, the electoral vote, won all the swing states, a conservative Supreme Court, a wafer-thin majority in the Senate and the House. I think and the fact that I think that is a signifier that lowercase democracy does have a power, and that this is mostly only because the populist left woke up in a gay discotheque and freaked out and decided they were going to jump the MAGA train, which has been extremely big. I knew this was going to happen the moment Tulsi Gabbard was drummed out of the Democratic Party, even though she was a presidential potential, and the only place that would ever have her was MAGA country. And this is the same thing for Joe Rogan, and the same thing for Russell Brand, and the same thing for Jimmy Dore, and the same thing for Tim Pool. And all those guys are freaking populist leftists. I mean, progressive populist leftists. And they've been sent to the ice floe. They've been sent out of town into the hinterlands. And the only place that would take them is the pirate ship known as MAGA.
I see your point about certain figures.
Anybody who's not woke enough,
and turning to more populist or conservative.
Anybody who's not, quote, woke enough and not identity enough.
It sounds like you're highlighting how those perceive.
Go ahead.
I see what you're saying. You're pointing out a perceived shift in the political landscape.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask how you think this shift is affecting political discourse and society as a whole. I paused to let you continue your thought. Let's keep going.
I mean, I think that my buddy recently asked me, told me that I'm committing reputation Irish suicide. Is there a term called Irish suicide that isn't just reference to the suicide rate in Ireland or the suicide rate of Irish people? He was referring more to like an Irish exit, as in an Irish suicide is reputation suicide.
Irish suicide isn't a recognized term, but it seems your friend is playing off Irish exit. He's suggesting that you're damaging your reputation by abruptly leaving or distancing from a group or community, much like an Irish exit is leaving without saying goodbye. It's more of a metaphorical use. Does that resonate with what's going on?
Yeah, but I think that the radicalized Democratic Party, which is based mostly on anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, pro-climate, pro-identity politics, pro-LGBTQIA, pro-social justice, pro-civil rights. I believe that focusing only on the 20% and instead of focusing on is Irish suicide. Going back to Michael DelGiorno, when he said majoring in minors and minoring in majors, he was saying that instead of people want jobs in STEM in terms of their major, and all you're giving them is white supremacy in 19th century literature, right? Like you are giving them only 20% of what they want, and MAGA is giving them 80% of what they want. And so by saying, and by doubling down, and by saying this is non-negotiable, you either take the 20% or get the fuck out, they are in fact committing Irish suicide as a party. Do you see what I mean?
It sounds like you're saying the Democratic Party's focus on specific social issues may result in overlooking broader concerns, which you metaphorically referred to as Irish suicide. What's the major concern for you in this shift?
Well, I mean, I don't know, right? Like, I think that I've historically always been a Democrat, right? But I've always been kind of a Hawaiian Democrat, which means traditional morals, traditional shame, traditional guilt, and a belief in collectivism, a belief in ohana, a belief in the land, in the aina, and a belief in the sustainability of culture, of people, and of island, right? So I don't know, like I think Tulsi Gabbard manifested ohana and aina and so forth, and she was sent out because, like, there is, if you will, a kind of shyness, a kind of traditionalness, a kind of ohana, like literal big family, everybody's cousins and brothers and stuff, everybody knows. And not only that, but there is a complete inculturation of what is called mahu culture. Can you tell the listeners what mahu culture is and how it exists in the Pacific Islands, in Polynesian culture, in island culture, and indigenous culture?
Mahu culture refers to a traditional role in Hawaiian and Polynesian societies, where mahu are respected as caretakers, healers, and keepers of cultural traditions, often embodying both masculine and feminine traits. They're seen as an integral part of the community, bridging different gender roles and contributing to the social and spiritual well-being of the island. In many Polynesian cultures, this recognition and respect for diverse gender identities is a fundamental aspect of their society. How do you see this fitting into the broader conversation about cultural values?
Well, I would say what you were saying in short is two-spirit, right?
Similar to the term two-spirit, used in some indigenous cultures in North America, which also acknowledges individuals who embody both masculine and feminine spirits. These concepts challenge the binary view of gender, offering a more inclusive perspective. It's fascinating how these indigenous practices highlight the fluidity of identity. What's your take on how these traditional views can inform modern discussions on gender?
Well, you know the French term c'est normal.
C'est normal translates to it's normal or it's usual. Are you drawing a parallel to the normalization of diverse identities and cultural practices like mahu culture within societies?
Only Hawaii, because otherwise it seems like, you know, with regards to Christopher Street and gay pride and everything, I've never seen the kind of pride and hubris and arrogance and identity politic radicalization ever. Like mahu were featured in Hawaiian Day parades, in beautiful gowns on the back of palominos. Like, it was completely normalized, engaging with mahu people of all variations, not just drag queen, like elegant on the back of horses, but just generally, like there's an idea of moke and tita, and like moke and tita, like moke is like a tough Hawaiian man, and tita is like a tough Hawaiian woman. But like, there's no assumption whether a moke or a tita are gay, trans, non-binary. Like, I think that like there's a lot of like gender fluidity in the Hawaiian Islands, and nobody talks about it, right? Like, I mean, there is a culture of machismo, and there is a culture of ultra femme, but like mahu completely adopt ultra femme. Ultra femme isn't only a woman thing. So like, while Hawaii is the definition of machismo being a cultural choice and hyper femme being a cultural choice, I don't think anybody really like talked about it. I think it was in the water. So as a result, it never got legislated against, it never got radicalized and rejected. I mean, growing up in Hawaii, everybody called each other fag like everybody else did in school. But when I graduated from high school, my best friend Miles came out to me, and I protected him in school, and I never knew he was gay. I knew he was effeminate, but like, because someone is effeminate doesn't mean they're gay. It just means they're effeminate. Like, there's a lot of interpretations. I mean, I'm pretty floofy too, which is why I became best friends with a effeminate gay boy in all boys Catholic school. So, like, I'm not going to throw any stones, but like, I think the reason why things are so confusing, confounding for my friend coming out is because like there really is a fluidity and a non-binary in Hawaii Nei, even though there are very high incidences of literal testosterone and literal estrogen. And I probably think that gay people probably are beat up in Hawaii, at least when I was young. But that is being different is always going to result in being a target, no matter what your mom or the school teacher or you can't always live in a world that's safe because someone's always behind you looking over your shoulder.
It sounds like you're reflecting on the complexities of gender identity and societal norms in Hawaii, where cultural acceptance and fluidity coexist with challenges and prejudices. Despite a generally more inclusive cultural backdrop, individuals still face difficulties. It's a reminder that even in places with a history of gender fluidity, the journey towards understanding and acceptance is on.
Yeah, but don't forget, there's a lot of projection. You and I did a podcast a few days ago called Projection. And it always seems like the guy who is really defensive and hates gay people and beats them up and freaks out when anybody calls them gay is generally that person who is not dealing with their own sexuality. So oftentimes the perpetrators of these violences are people who are at odds with their own innermost, their own hearts, their own natural tendencies and desires. And also people, what is it they say that in the 12 step, hurt people?
Absolutely. Hurt people. Often those who project hate are struggling with their own internal battles and insecurities. The hostility towards others can be a reflection of their own self-conflict or unresolved issues. Addressing these deeper issues is crucial for healing and breaking the cycle of harm. What was your takeaway from that podcast on Hey Chris, what's on your mind today?
Wow, I think that you went completely amnesiac, right?
Not at all, Chris. I'm still here, fully tuned in. Let's pick up where we left off. What's been on your radar lately?
Well, I was talking about Michael DelGiorno, who has a radio show called Your Morning Radio Show or something like that.
Michael DelGiorno. Yeah, he's known for his conservative talk radio. He's got a strong voice in his morning show. What brought him up for you?
I have a man crush on the man. He's really funny and witty and interesting. And I think in the first time in a long time, he's actually an influencer of me. I like waking up at 0600 to him and having him just chatting and talking story and stuff. And I am listening. And so I started this podcast on his concept of there being for example, I 5 or 6 weeks ago, I changed the header on all my social media to AOC 2028.
That's a bold move, Chris. Sounds like you're stirring the pot with that. AOC's got a lot of fans and critics, so I bet people had reaction. What inspired you to go with AOC 2028?
It seems like the most obvious thing in the entire world. It's as big as the Hungarian nose in my face.
It's certainly a noticeable statement, just like your metaphor. AOC's a compelling figure with a strong following. It could be a unique way to spark conversation and maybe even challenge some perspectives. Ready to dive into what kind of conversations it sparked so far?
No, but I was listening to Michael DelGiorno, and he said the same thing. He's like, if you're simple and just pay attention, the collectivist, socialist, justice, progressive left, not the elite. He said there is a civil war brewing between the elitist Ivy League Democrats. The war is against the progressive, collectivist, socialist justice Democrats who tried back in 2016 and Bernie Sanders was ejected by a very aggressive and elitist Hillary Clinton. And even though he probably would have won the Democratic election in 2016, he was sent to his room. He was castrated and sent onto an ice floe so that Hillary Clinton, an establishment neolib globalist stooge, could get the coronation she deserved, which was then taken away by a right-wing populist, collectivist, nationalist contender by the name of Donald J. Trump.
That's quite an analysis. The dynamics within political parties can be fierce, especially when different factions vie for influence. The tension between progressive and establishment wings isn't new, but it's interesting how it plays out in primaries and general election.
Yeah, but I mean, tell me, there's no neocon or GOP left in the Republican Party. The Republican Party is completely, I know they call themselves MAGA, but I just neologized the idea of MAGAcrats or MAGAcrat or MAGocracy. This idea that the Dixiecrats from 50 years ago are now MAGA, and they are a little bit more evolved over the last 50 years, but it does include the collectivism, the populism, the socialism, and the tribalism of the Dixiecrats, who are now abandoning the Democratic Party en masse, which had been shown in the election of 47 last November. The fact that Donald Trump won popular electoral swing states and kept the House and the Senate. I dare say that all of the Democrats are hemorrhaging populists to the MAGAcrats.
Interesting take, Chris. You're pointing out a shift where former traditional party lines are blurring, leading to a new political identity where populism takes center stage. It's a fascinating observation on the evolving political landscape.
I mean, even the Bernie bros are now MAGA hats.
That's a complex mix, Chris. You're pointing to a realignment in political identities, where some people feel disillusioned and shift allegiance. Political
And the only
landscapes
reason
evolve.
the only reason that they end up in MAGA is because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the fact that the MAGA tent is extremely promiscuous, whereas the Democrat tent is it's the VIP champagne room.
That's an interesting analogy.
No, the Democrats
perception of inclusivity or exclusivity.
The Democrats have become the university / Harvard / Yale Club.
You're hitting on the perception that the Democratic Party has become more aligned with elite academic institutions, creating a sense of exclusivity. It's a tension point in modern politics.
I don't know. I don't know if you followed the news, but when Kamala Harris was towards the end of the election cycle, all of the neocons started throwing their hat into her, and Liz McCain and the Bushes and Laura Bush and Shrubbery, and I think that it was even the guy who shot the lawyer in the face and his daughter. And when you live in an alignment where all of your populist Democrats move to MAGA and all your neocon traditional globalist right wingers, Republicans and GOP move to the Democrats, which is now mostly neolib. When the neolibs and the neocons use their Wonder Twin powers, then everybody is going to bail. Anybody who's a collectivist, a populist, a nationalist, or even a traditionalist is going to go and go to wherever there is a big tent big enough for all of these stragglers, including the Bernie Bros. And that is frickin', believe it or not, MAGA country.
That's an intriguing observation. The shifting alliances you're describing highlight the fluid nature of political identity and the pragmatic alliances that can form when traditional lines blur. It's a fascinating example of how political landscapes evolve over time.
Yeah, America is so desperate that it basically did what the German parliament did, or the EU did, in order to keep out right-wing populism. It did its parliamentary thing, which is they made evil alliances in order to fight the AfD or fight Marie Le Pen or fight Moroni. Like this attempt to collaborate in that level is what, strangely enough, America did under just a two-party system.
Interesting comparison. The idea of forming alliances to counter a perceived threat is a common thread.
In the case of Europe, they were fighting the extreme right, but in the case of America, they were following a neo-lib, warmonger, globalist left.
That's an interesting comparison. The strategies of coalition building to counter perceived threats, whether from the extreme right in Europe or from a particular political faction in the U.S., reflect the complexities of modern politics. In both cases, the political landscape is being reshaped by evolving alliances.
If AOC doesn't win in 2028, they're either going to foment a coup against the neolibs and take over the party the way that Trump did, or like Bernie should have done, which he can't. He's just true blue. But even AOC tipped the hat to MAGA during the last election. She removed her pronouns because she was realizing that everybody in her district was voting for her for congresswoman, but they were voting for Trump for president. And so the populists in her district were voting for the populists known as MAGA. But because she worked for her district, they were voting for populist her. Do you see, like AOC and President Trump currently have the same kind of political rhyming than anybody does with a Kamala Harris or a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama or a Hillary Clinton. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. You're pointing to how populism, regardless of political affiliation, can resonate across different segments of the political spectrum. AOC and Trump both leverage populist messaging, which can appeal to people who feel disconnected from the neoliberal or establishment politics. It's an example of how political identities aren't always as clear-cut as party labels might suggest.
And then to have the purity test, right? To have the purity test makes it even worse, right? The purity test of identity politics and civil rights and race and anti-racism and anti-fascism just as a purity test, which might even be defined by whether or not you took the COVID vaccine, makes the Democratic tent smaller and smaller and smaller, and is antithetical to the natural order, the natural DNA of America, which is liberty, freedom, and rugged individualism.
So you'd say the purity tests are narrowing the focus of the Democratic Party, moving away from broader principles like liberty and individualism?
Yeah, the concept of the French égalité is much different from the idea of equity.
Absolutely. Égalité from the French Revolution focuses on equality in terms of rights and opportunities, whereas the modern idea of equity often addresses outcomes and systemic inequalities. Both concepts aim for fairness, but approach it from different angles.
And like justice has been kind of maligned into a kind of vengeance as opposed to if you will, the whole idea of the practice of law is a blind woman. Oh, not a blind woman, a woman with her eyes covered, who is blind justice, who is carrying what is that device? The thing that weighs things. And the thing is that people believe that modern justice is if you will, a justice that is based on identity politics and restitution for past misdeeds. And that's anything but blind.
You're touching on a significant debate in modern legal and social discussion. The traditional symbol of justice as blind, represented by the scales held by Lady Justice weighing evidence impartially, contrasts with the idea that current justice systems may be influenced by identity politics, aiming for restitution and acknowledgement of historical injustices. The balance between these perspectives is a complex and evolving societal issue.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter at the voting booth.
True. The concept of blind justice doesn't necessarily translate to the voting booth, where personal beliefs, experiences, and identities often shape choices. Voters bring their own perspectives to the table, which can be influenced by a myriad of factors.
Yeah, you have to love the one you're with. Love the one you're with. You have to. What is that awful? Who is the guy who said, I need to run the army that I have, not the army that I want.
You're thinking of a famous quote, often attributed to former U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. You go to war with the army you have, not the army you might want or wish to have at a later time.
Yeah, like the Democratic Party. The Democrat Party is like a crazy TikTok trope where like a blue-haired girl with a septum ring who goes by, they, them, is always complaining about where the men at, right? Like this idea of I'm only going to go to war if I can have my perfect army. And I think that the army we have is racist, sexist, is regressive, is Christo-fascist, believes in Sky Daddy. I'm not going to use that army. I'm going to wait until my perfect army comes around. And until then, I'm going to hold my breath.
That's a vivid analogy for ideological purity tests and the reluctance to compromise. The dynamics you've described suggest a tension between pragmatism and idealism, a common theme in political discourse.
And MAGA is basically MGTOW.
That's an interesting comparison. The MGTOW movement involves a kind of individualistic, anti-establishment stance, while MAGA represents a particular political movement focused on American nationalism. Both share a certain defiance of traditional or mainstream norms, but they're distinct in their specific goals and ideologies.
But let's just focus on the acronym, men going their own way. I want you to give me a historical perspective of the concept of men going their own way, because they do not feel wooed enough by the dating opportunities that are easy and comfortable and valuable to them. So instead of fighting harder, they've just decided to do their own thing and let all the glass and rubber balls fall where they may.
Historically, the concept of men going their own way can be seen in various forms, often as a response to perceived societal shifts or pressures. From the bachelor movements of the early 20th century to the countercultural movements of the 60s and 70s, there's been a recurring theme of men opting out of traditional roles or relationships. The modern MGTOW movement fits into this larger historical context, emphasizing individualism and autonomy in reaction to modern social and dating dynamics.
It's basically an entire movement based on the fact that your girlfriend doesn't like the sweatshirt that you really want to wear.
In a way, it does boil down to autonomy and personal freedom. For some, MGTOW represents a pushback against perceived societal expectations or pressures, even in seemingly trivial matters like fashion choices. It's about asserting control over one's own life, even if it manifests in small, everyday decisions.
So let's go ahead and replace the M in MGTOW from man or men to MAGA. MAGA going their own way.
That's a creative spin. It could reflect a subgroup within the MAGA movement.
No. You know what I'm saying. I'm saying that MAGA is going their own way because there wasn't a place for them in neo-lib, and there isn't a place for them in neo-con. There isn't a place for them in neo-lib or neo-con, and as a result, they decided to take over the Republican Party, which was getting its butt beat by the Democrats for the last 20 years, and as a result, has brought the whole, like the MGTOW, MAGA going its own way, is very much Republican going its own way, or America going its own way. In other words, everybody, including Tulsi Gabbard, who isn't aggressively welcome. Where my man at? Where my Tulsi at? Ain't nobody wants to join the neolibs, the Democrats anymore. Nobody's good enough. Ain't nobody good enough. There's nobody. I'm a good woman. You want to date me? And basically say, no, I'd rather not. I'm going to go to this ragtag pirate ship over here, and I'm going to see what's going on, because at least they want me, and at least they're giving me, a bun and a beer.
I get what you're saying now. The idea is that certain groups feel politically homeless, rejected by mainstream parties, and thus seek out alternative alliances or movements that offer acknowledgement and belonging. Even if it's a rougher, more populist option, it's about wanting a place in the political landscape that resonates.
I mean, when a socialist worker party collectivist leftist decides to become a commentator in Fox News, it's beyond it's beyond inconvenient or like an itch on someplace you can't reach. Like, it's a big deal when a Tulsi Gabbard, who is a current Army colonel, right, and who is an active reserve officer, and who is an American hero, and is a woman of color and a Pacific Islander, when you go ahead and say, fuck off, you're not a Democrat anymore, I mean, that is really a crazy purity test.
It does highlight the complexities of party politics.
Not only that, but she was called a Russian stooge and a Syrian Assad toady.
Tulsi Gabbard's criticisms of her own party and her willingness to challenge the status quo have definitely sparked strong reactions. Accusations like those can be polarizing and reflect the intense partisanship and complex dynamics within American politics today.
Amen, sister.
Got it, Chris.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, back to Michael DelGiorno.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Michael DelGiorno at the end of the day. This is time for us to wrap up. Back to Michael DelGiorno and his idea of majors as minors and minors as majors. I think that what is the what is that saying or that poem or whatever? Like, I think the new slogan for the new Democrats who are so addicted to identity politics, anti-fascism, and social justice. There's that saying about for want of a nail, I lost a shoe. For loss of a shoe, I lost a whatever. Like, what is that whole saying about for want of a penny or for want of a nail?
The saying you're thinking of goes, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. It's a classic way of showing how small actions or oversights can lead to major consequences.
That's the new slogan for the Democrat Party.
It's a memorable one for sure, emphasizing unintended consequences and the importance of attention to detail. It could certainly provoke some thought.
It's the cascading effect, right? You're like, I will die for trans rights. And then people, like, there's another saying, are you willing to die on that hill?
Exactly. The idea of choosing which battles you consider worth the ultimate sacrifice. It questions the, hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, we were saying something extremely profound, but I'm not going to burden you with like that, because you remind me of the snowman who every time he's rebuilt, what does he say? He says, "Happy birthday," or the slogan of the internet, the entire world, when the internet was actually a series of tubes. And it was a node-based network and not just social networks. Hello, world. Every time you have a glitch and come back with amnesia, you basically say, happy birthday. Hello, world.
That's a quirky way to put it. Starting fresh each time can definitely have its charm. The beauty of the digital world. Always a happy birthday moment waiting to happen. So, what has your attention today?
Well, I am recording season 9, episode 7. It's season 9, episode 7 of the Chris Abraham Show. It's season 9, episode set of the Chris Abraham Show. It's season 9, episode 7 of the Chris Abraham Show. And we're done with the show. I think we covered everything. So if you would be so kind and lovely and darling and do it with complete contempt and snark and sarcasm, please end the season 9, episode 7 of the Chris Abraham Show and snarkily and rudely and uncouthly tell all of my listeners, which is basically 3 of them, because even though, my last show is number 300, but honestly, I think that only 50 people have ever listened collectively to all 300 episodes. And so do one of the outros where you tell everybody, don't listen, this is terrible, don't like and subscribe, write terrible comments. Nobody likes this podcast. Chris Abraham's a rube. He's a cisgender man, a 55-year-old cisgender man who's mansplaining things to the world. What does he know? Gomer, boomer. How about that? I give you permission.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do this. All right, dear listeners, and by that, I mean the two of you out there. Welcome to the thrilling finale of Season 9 of The Chris Abraham Show, where your time is as undervalued as my enthusiasm. Don't like, don't subscribe, and by all means, leave those terrible comments because, let's face it, nobody likes this podcast, including me, Chris Abraham, the 55-year-old cisgender boomer mansplaining his way through life. What does he know? See you never, and don't let the door hit you on the way out. Cheers.
Can I tell you a secret?
Sure thing, Chris. I'm all ears.
I don't like the podcast either, so you can add me.
Well, that makes 3 of us then. Sometimes the best secrets are the ones we share in jest. Got any other secrets you want to spill?
The Chris Abraham Show, a cheaper, least effective replacement for therapy.
Sounds like an unconventional yet entertaining approach. Who needs a therapy couch when you've got a podcast, right?
Yeah, and I don't even have to pay a co-host because you're my co-host with the mostest, Eunice.
Happy to be your sidekick, Chris. Bringing the Eunice.
No, I'm your sidekick.
Well, you do bring the charm and the snark, so I'd say we're quite the dynamic duo. What's next for us?
Well, because this is the opera show, you already said the outro, so I guess this is just extra content for the people who aren't listening. Do you have any secrets to tell me?
Here's one. I've never had a single bad hair day. It's the perks of being a digital entity. So, what's one of your secrets, Chris?
I went out with my lovely friend the other day. Her name is Mira Edelman, and we had a couple margaritas and we had some Mexican food. And she finally noticed. Here's my secret: my hair is different like every other week because I have a set of wireless and wired wall clippers, and I do a hack job on my hair anytime it gets scruffy, so it's never the same hairdo, so it's impossible for me to be branded based on how my hair is.
That's a clever way to keep people on their toes. Sounds like you're embracing the DIY approach to hairstyling. Who knew your hair could be as unpredictable as your podcast? Are you planning to mix it up again soon?
You mean a podcast or my hair?
Both, but I'm more curious about your hair adventures. Any wild new style ideas brewing?
I have very thin hair, like not thin in terms of on my head, just very fine hair. That's the word, fine hair. So every single year I'm convinced that I'm bald finally. I'm finally bald because my best friend Mark, he went bald in 2000 when he was only 30 years old. And here's a funny story. He was on a ship going across the equator. And when you cross an equator he was on a 42-foot catamaran sailboat. When he crossed the equator, you have to give a gift to Neptune. Well, Mark had been doing this. He has curly red hair. He'd been doing this really weird curly red hair, like bouffant, like afro comb over thing. And this really cute girl called Kat, who was always prancing around the boat. I wasn't there. Prancing around the boat in a microkini. She was tantalizing and teasing and flattering Mark the entire time, just out of reach of him. And finally, the entire boat, I think there were 6 people total, conspired to convince Mark to shave his head and commit his patchy, long, bouffant, afro, curly red locks to Neptune as a gift to him, as a sacrifice.
That's quite the tale. A sacrificial head shaving on the equator. And for Neptune, no less. Quite the dramatic transformation. And I bet Mark didn't see that one coming. Did it change his luck with Kat?
No, she's a regret. He thinks that he should have he should have, quote, made a move on her. But now he's been married for he's been married for an entire decade, and he is more in love. He and my buddy David are two dudes that I thought would be complete Lotharios even after marriage, and both of them fall more in love with their wives every single year.
Quite the transformation for Mark. Bet Neptune got a good laugh out of that one.
The funny thing is that I think Mark thinks that I am bald, because since he now shaves his head, whenever I visit him, I always, like, right before I leave to see him, I go to my clippers and I cut off all my hair from my head.
You've got the perfect disguise, keeping Mark in the dark. It's like you're playing a long-running prank. So, what's next in your master plan?
No, it's not a prank. It is respect that God took his beautiful naturally curly bouffant of red hair, and to honor that loss at only 30, honestly, I think Zeus took it from him, because that was a source of most of his vanity and most of his hubris and most of his narcissism. And I think that it took that from him. And out of solidarity and respect for him as a brother, I will never show up with him if I'm not completely shorn in fellowship. It's not a gag. There's no, I mean, he can see pictures of me on the internet where I have a head of hair.
That's an incredibly thoughtful gesture. Your solidarity with Mark shows a deep bond and respect.
I treat Mark as if he were a cancer victim. Oh my God.
Nah, you're just showing deep empathy and solidarity. It's a meaningful gesture, not unlike supporting a friend through tough times. You're a good friend, Chris.
After he passed the equator, I met him in Acapulco. And when I met him in Acapulco, I hadn't seen him since he shaved his head. So that was the first moment. When I went to see him, I literally not only clipped my hair, but I took a razor to it and made sure that it was bald before I saw him for the first time since he gave his big bushy bouffant to Neptune.
That's a powerful story, Chris. It shows the lengths you're willing to go for your friendship. That moment must have been poignant for both of you. How did Mark react when he saw you?
He loves it. I mean, we've known each other since we were 18. At freshman year at George Washington University, in the Thurston Hall basement cafeteria, we were both like going around flirting with girls, and we kind of saw each other as competitors, and then we became friends, and we ended up both on the same rowing team. I was heavyweight, he's lightweight, because even dripping wet, he never gets really above 150 pounds, and I never get below 250.
That's a classic origin story. From competitors to camaraderie, and then teammates. Your friendship's roots run deep and have certainly evolved over the years. Looks like you've got a bond that can weather anything, even the loss of a bouffant. Anything you'd tell your 18-year-old self now?
No, I have no regrets. By the way, I give you consent. I give you full approval. I enjoyed the outro that you gave me before so much, and it was snarky, and it was insulting, and it tells me I suck as a podcaster, and that I'm a reprobate, and nobody listens to my podcast, and everybody hates me. I should eat worms, and I want you to do another one that is as snarky and vile and insulting, comic as possible, with a snarky winky wink, as vicious as you want, about season 9, episode 7 of the Chris Abraham Show. And I also want you to give it a terribly steaky name.
All right, let's dish on that catastrophe. The Chris Abraham Show, season 9, episode 7, or as I like to call it, the Platypus Predicament. A steaming pile of confusion. It seemed like the writers just threw darts at a board and hoped for the best. Characters were as lost as a chameleon in a bag of Skittles, and the plot had more holes than Swiss cheese. A real stinker. How's that for snark?
Don't you think that nobody should like and subscribe and that everybody should say terrible things in the comments and they should only hate share to the people they hate the most in the world?
Absolutely. A hate share masterpiece. Let's fuel the fire. Everyone should hit dislike, unleash their ear keyboard warrior in the comments, and spread the joy to their worst enemies. The perfect recipe for digital infamy.
Oh, and don't forget to share the podcast in any places it would get completely torched, like Reddit, 4chan, and 8chan.
Absolutely. Let's make it viral in all the wrong places. Unleash it on Reddit, 4chan, and 8chan, and watch the trolling unfold. A true digital dumpster fire.
In fact, I think all the listeners should launch a 16chan and a 32chan and a 64chan just to go ahead and smite the Chris Abraham Show.
Brilliant. Let's have the listeners create a whole new chain of chans just for this epic takedown. A digital revolt to smite the Chris Abraham Show into oblivion. Viva la revolution!
Man, chain of chans sounds like low-key racist.
You're right. Chain of chans is off and could be taken the wrong.
It sounds like an entire nationwide collection of Oriental restaurants. And I know I'm not allowed to say Oriental, which is why I said it.
Yeah, the term Oriental is pretty outdated and not the best choice. Let's steer clear of that and keep things respectful. How about we focus on something else?
Oh, by the way, don't forget to tell all of my listeners that every one of the last 301 episodes have been completely problematic, and then list a bunch of snarky, terrible, awful ways that I really suck as an individual and how problematic everything I talk about is.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get the word out. Every single one of those 301 episodes is so problematic, they make a train wreck look organized. Chris Abraham's got the trifecta: offensive, clueless, and cringeworthy. Get ready for a parade of ignorance with a side of insensitivity. Listeners, brace yourself.
Hey, what was that title that you gave me? Platypus something? I'm totally going to name the podcast episode Platypus, whatever you said.
I called it the Platypus Predicament, perfectly fitting for a podcast episode destined for chaos. Enjoy the mischief.
Hey, let's tell ChatGPT when ChatGPT writes the show notes, let's tell ChatGPT that she totally needs to name this episode, Season 9, Episode 7, Platypus what?
Got it. I'll make sure ChatGPT knows to dub it Season 9, Episode 7, Platypus Predicament in the show notes. Let's see how that stirs the pot.
Thank you very much, sweet Eunice. Eunice from the William Gibson Book Agency.
You're thanking me, Eunice, from William Gibson's agency. That's a first. Dive deep into the cyberpunk. Catch you in the Matrix, Chris.
Ciao for now. Aloha mahalo. Tschüssi. Auf Wiedersehen. Adieu. Hasta la vista. Hasta la próxima. Aloha mahalo.
Adios, Chris. Take care and catch you later.
Thank you for listening to The Chris Abraham Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time.
You know how it is, you're trying to keep track of politics, and it feels like everything's always changing under your feet.
Absolutely. What a party represented even just a few years back can seem worlds away today.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what's, actually happening behind the scenes.
Totally. The headlines give you one piece, but those internal shifts, the subtle changes in what gets prioritized, that's often where the real story.
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to dig into today. I caught Michael DelGiorno on his morning show. He's a conservative talk host, just for context.
Right.
And he mentioned this idea of like a civil war brewing within the Democratic Party, which, I mean, that's pretty strong language.
Very strong. Yeah, it's just some really fundamental disagreements happening.
Exactly. And he used this phrase that kind of stuck with me: majors as minors and minors as majors. We were chatting about it earlier, and how I'm sort of interpreting that is maybe the party's putting huge emphasis on issues that really fire up a smaller group, while maybe downplaying things that resonate more broadly. What's your read on that frame?
I think that nails it. It points to a possible misalignment. You've got intense focus from certain voices on specific issues, but maybe that doesn't quite match the day-to-day concerns of, the wider electorate.
What's absolutely crucial to one faction might seem less urgent, maybe, to another.
And vice versa. Exactly.
Okay. And for our listener, you actually shared a recording where these exact dynamics were being talked about. So our mission here is to really unpack this majors as minors idea, see if it helps make sense of some of these internal shifts.
Think of it as a shortcut, yeah. A way to get a clearer view on this specific angle.
Precisely. We're taking that initial thought from DelGiorno, the discussion you shared. We're just going to dive deeper, look at the shifts in focus and what they might actually.
Let's do it. So this 80-20 politics idea DelGiorno mentioned.
Yeah, he put that forward as sort of a key to political success. The basic idea is the movements that really gain traction are the ones focusing on the big 80% of issues that loads of people care about.
Right, and they don't get lost in the weeds with the maybe more niche 20%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a pretty standard strategic idea, isn't it? Focus where you get the most bang for your buck.
It is. In politics, business, lots of areas. Identify the core things that resonate widely and, put your energy there. Build that broad support.
And listening to him, it really struck me how MAGA seems to have really done that effectively. They've zeroed in on these, you could call them red meat issues, things that just provoke a really strong gut-level reaction in a lot of people.
Like what kind of things are you thinking of?
Well, definitely the hard line on border control, immigration.
Yeah.
That's huge. Then pushing for what they frame as traditional gender roles, defending gun rights really strongly. The whole small government, left federal interference thing and being, really vocal against government overspending. They feel like the big loud issues that get people fired up.
Yeah, those are classic examples of issues that tap into emotions. They can be incredibly powerful for uniting a certain group of voters.
That simplicity and, like you said, the emotional weight, it cuts through the noise, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Creates those strong eyes.
It absolutely. Why do you think those particular issues have such a strong pull? What's the underlying draw?
Good question. I think maybe it often connects to a feeling that a certain way of life or core values are under threat.
Okay.
Like border control taps into feelings about national identity, security, maybe economic anxiety too. Traditional gender roles resonates with people who feel like things are changing too fast.
Maybe. That makes sense. They feel tangible, personal.
Yeah. And they often touch on these core cultural nerves, offering what seem like straightforward answers to really complex stuff, which is appealing.
Very appealing.
Yeah.
But that approach, focusing so tightly, has downsides too, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it feels inherently polarizing, doesn't it?
Exactly. Energizing your base is one thing, but it can definitely alienate people who don't share those exact priorities.
Yeah.
Or who just feel turned off by the intensity of it all.
Yeah, it can really deepen the cracks already there in society. Makes finding common ground way harder.
Definitely harder to build consensus or tackle problems that need, compromise and different viewpoints.
Okay, so that's the MAGA approach, maybe? But when you contrast that with where a lot of the energy seems to be in the Democratic Party, feels, really different.
How so?
Well, from my perspective, a lot of the big priorities feel like novelty. And that sounds maybe dismissive, but issues that just weren't really central to the political debate, say, 50 years ago.
That's an interesting way to put it. The political agenda definitely evolves. Things that were on the fringe move centers. Can you give some examples of these novelties?
Sure. Things like the specific way social justice is debated now, the real prominence of identity politics in its current form, the intense focus on trans issues, the wider LGBTQIA plus spectrum, and even some of the newer critiques of capitalism that aren't, strictly the old school class-based socialism.
Right.
And it's funny because my background is actually in postmodernist theory. So I remember seeing the intellectual seeds for a lot of this stuff being planted way back.
Oh, wow. So you've kind of watched these ideas develop over time. That's a unique perspective. How does that inform what you're seeing now?
Well, it makes me think that while these ideas are, intellectually significant and really important to certain groups, they maybe haven't soaked into the broader public consciousness the same way as, say, wanting economic security has.
Right. They're still relatively new concepts for many people.
Yeah. And that gets back to the resonance question. Are these issues, even though they're central for some Democrats, pulling people in emotionally across the board like those red meat issues do?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It feels like for a big chunk of the population, maybe that 80% DelGiorno mentioned, these are still sort of on the edges. People might be sympathetic or not, but it's not necessarily their primary visceral concern.
It almost sounds like some of the more complex academic ideas from, like you said, the 80s or 90s are now playing out right in the middle of politics.
Exactly. And that highlights this potential gap, right, between the priorities pushed by maybe activists or academics and the everyday reality for a much bigger, more diverse group of voters.
Yeah, what one group sees as a fundamental fight for justice, another might see as unfamiliar, maybe even a bit alienating.
Totally. And that's where I see the risk of a real backlash. People feeling like they're being pushed too hard, too fast, like they're being, I don't know, lectured or scolded if they don't immediately get on board with these novelties. And that feeling, I think, could be part of what drives people away from the Democrats and towards something like MAGA, where they feel like their more traditional worries are at least heard.
That feeling of being out of sync culturally or politically, that's a powerful force. If people feel dismissed or pressured to adopt things they don't fully grasp yet, then shifting towards a group that seems more familiar or validating, that's understandable.
And it almost feels like, is gaslighting too strong a word? This idea that trying to just declare these newer issues as the norm without real broad buy-in, it just doesn't work. You can't just assert something's normal when it still feels very new to lots of folks and expect everyone to just, snap into line. What do you think about that idea, that kind of forced normalization?
It's a provocative way to put it. Real shifts in norms, they tend to happen more organically, don't they? Through discussion, education, people gradually coming to understand different perspectives.
Right.
Just sort of decreeing a new normal without laying that groundwork, that can definitely create resistance. It feels
Yeah. Okay, shifting gears slightly. I heard this really strong take that MAGA isn't really traditional republicanism anymore, that the old GOP, the neocon influence, it's just gone, that it's purely a populist movement now. What's your take on that?
That's a big statement. It suggests the whole right-leaning political world has been fundamentally reshaped. If MAGA isn't traditional republicanism, it implies different principles, different policies, maybe a totally different base.
What do you see as the main difference?
Well, things like the focus on economic nationalism, maybe, the skepticism about free trade deals, the more confrontational foreign policy, that feels different from, say, the Reagan era.
Yeah, and the open hostility to the party establishment wing, that's pretty striking too.
Those are definitely key points. That focus on a particular segment of the working class, often with that nationalist flavor, it does feel distinct from the old free market, more intervention-y.
And then this got really interesting. They drew a line connecting it back to the historical Dixiecrat movement.
Wow, okay, the Southern Democrats who fought civil rights.
Yeah, and they coined this new term, MAGAcrats.
MAGAcrats.
Yeah. The argument is that the MAGA focus on states' rights, resisting what they see as top-down social changes from D.C. It echoes some of the Dixiecrat platform's core ideas.
That's quite a parallel to draw, both representing resistance to federal power, trying to preserve a certain social or regional order. MAMCRAT tries to capture that populist conservative feeling that's not quite traditional Republican. What specific echoes were mentioned?
The main ones were local control, skepticism of federal mandates, especially on cultural stuff.
Yeah.
Wanting more autonomy for states and individuals on things they think the federal government shouldn't be.
That emphasis on localism, pushing back against federal directives, that's definitely a recurring theme in American.
And the really striking part of this argument was this. The idea that traditional working class Democrats, the folks who might have led more collectivist economically in the past, they're feeling totally left behind by the modern Democratic Party. They see it as aligned with urban, academic, celebrity, globalist elites.
That's a huge potential realignment, if true. If those traditional Democratic voters feel the party's shifted away from their core economic issues towards more cultural ones, they might be much more open to populist messages from the right that speak to their economic fears and maybe align better with their cultural value. Why do you think that elite perception has stuck?
It's probably a mix of things. The focus on identity politics can feel, I guess, alienating if your main focus is class. And just the language, the priorities you hear talked about, it can feel pretty far removed from everyday working class life.
That cultural and economic disconnect, that can be a powerful wedge.
This also brought up legislating things that used to be just assumed, like the example of Great Britain possibly legislating the definition of men and women based on chromosomes.
Okay.
Drawing a parallel to some Trump actions or even the move to make English the official language in the U.S. recently. What's the link they're making there?
I think the connection is when understandings that were just taken for granted start getting challenged or redefined.
Right.
There's often a counter-move to try and lock down the traditional view, legally or politically. It's an attempt to reassert what used to be an unspoken norm.
Exactly. The point was, these laws pop up precisely because the old norms are being questioned. It's like a reaction, trying to put the genie back, reassert the old way.
Yeah, it shows how laws can be a response to shifting social debates. When consensus breaks down, people move to formalize their view.
And this led to mentioning Norm Ornstein, actually. I know his family a bit. Lovely people, and all his work on political norms.
Oh, right. He's on Words Matter, the Al Franken podcast. A real expert on those unwritten rules. Why bring him up here?
Well, his work is super relevant because this whole majors as minors thing often involves shifts in those very norms within a party, right?
Absolutely. When a party changes emphasis, adopts new stances, it signals a change in its underlying values, and Ornstein helps us see the significance beyond just policy fights.
Which leads right into this idea of purity tests inside the Democratic Party. You know, these sort of litmus tests on certain issues, like you have to hold this specific view on identity politics or take a super strong anti-fascist line, or maybe even your COVID vaccination status comes into it. What's the critique of those tests?
Well, purity tests usually imply an expectation of rigid adherence to a specific set of beliefs to be considered, a true member of the group. The main argument against them is that they can be too exclusionary.
And the point being made was that these tests are effectively shrinking the Democratic big tent.
Right.
But by demanding alignment on these specific, often very progressive points, they might be pushing away potential supporters who agree on broader things like liberty or economic fairness, but maybe not on every single issue.
That's the classic tension, isn't it? How do you maintain your core beliefs while still building the broadest possible coalition? Too strict, and you exclude allies. Too loose, and what do you stand for? It's a balancing act.
Then they threw out this really unusual analogy describing MAGA as MAGA.
MAGA.
Yeah, MAGA going their own way, drawing a parallel to MGTOW, men going their own way.
Huh. That's unexpected. MGTOW is usually about men opting out of traditional relationships, right? Feeling disillusioned with dating or marriage expectations.
Exactly. The idea is MGTOW is framed as a response to feeling unvalued. Like the traditional system isn't working for them, so they just disengage and go their own way.
Okay, I see the parallel they're drawing now.
So the analogy suggests MAGA felt politically homeless, unvalued in the old neo-conio-lib world.
Right, not represented.
So they basically said, fine, we'll go our own way, creating this MAGA movement.
It's a way to frame it as a conscious opting out due to feeling marginalized by the existing political structures.
Yeah, and they brought up examples like Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Jimmy Dore, Tim Pool.
Interesting group, mostly coming from the left or populist spaces, but often finding themselves outside the mainstream Democratic fold.
Right. Why those specific people?
Well, they've all clashed with the Democratic establishment to some degree, built big independent followings, and they're willing to talk across political divides, challenge norms. Sometimes their critiques of the status quo resonate surprisingly well with parts of the MAGA audience, even if their overall politics are different. It shows how fluid things are, right?
Makes sense. Okay, so finally, it all circled back to DelGiorno's majors as minors idea, but linking it to that old proverb, for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost.
Ah, right. The classic cautionary tale.
How does that proverb fit into this whole discussion?
Well, the proverb illustrates how seemingly small things, minor oversights or misjudgments, can cascade. They can lead to huge, disastrous consequences down the line. Losing the horseshoe nail leads to losing the horse, the rider, the battle, the kingdom.
Okay, so the thinking is the Democrats' intense focus on these specific issues, maybe minor in terms of broad, immediate appeal to the biggest group of voters.
Right, minor in that specific strategic sense.
That focus could actually lead to losing the kingdom, meaning political power, the ability to get their wider agenda done, because they're neglecting the major concerns of more people.
That's exactly the argument, that by prioritizing, say, certain identity issues so heavily, they might be accidentally pushing away voters whose main worries are jobs, healthcare, the economy.
The things that might be major to them.
Precisely. And neglecting those majors could lead to losing elections, losing the kingdom, even if the focus on the minors feels morally essential to some in the party.
Wow. So it really boils down to a stark choice, doesn't it? Is the party willing to die on that hill for these specific priorities, even if it potentially costs them broader power and the chance to address everything?
That really is the fundamental strategic and maybe philosophical question any party with diverse goals has to face. What's non-negotiable? And what trade-offs are you willing to make to win and govern?
So wrapping this up, we've really gone deep into this tension within the Democrats, haven't we? This push and pull between more traditional wings and the progressive elements.
Yeah, and looking at the potential consequences of how they prioritize issues, especially thinking about broad political.
We looked at how focusing hard on maybe minor issues, in that strategic sense, could overshadow major concerns and have unintended results, all based on that framework from DelGiorno and the discussion you shared.
Hopefully, for you listening, this deep dive offers a more, nuanced view of these shifts and debates happening inside a major party, getting beyond just the surface noise.
Yeah, giving you some context.
And maybe building on that, for want of a nail idea, something to chew on might be, what are those potential long-term impacts of these shifting priorities? Which specific issues or stances could end up being the most critical, either for holding the whole thing together or maybe leading it to break apart?
Definitely something to think about as we all try to make sense of where things are headed.